Hey guys, Non-Zero here, coach of the Pittsburgh Celesteelas, bringing you my draft recap for Season 4 of the DGBA. So for this draft, we went with a point system, which means that over the 11 rounds in the draft, we have 120 points to spend. And the different mons ranged from having 1 point to 20 points as their price. So with that in mind, let's just go ahead and jump into the draft that I ended up with. And as we go along, I'll just kind of talk what my thought process was as I was drafting, what kind of my long-term goals were, and that sort of thing. So for the first couple of rounds, I kind of just drafted the mons that I wanted to try out. I wanted to see how they functioned in draft format. And those were actually my first 3-round picks. So starting off, we have Mega Venusaur. I really thought that this was reasonably priced at 16 and a decent deal. I personally have had a lot of trouble myself with this mon in draft format. It's one of those things where if your opponent loses their flying or their psychic type attacker, this can just actually 1v1 the rest of any teams. It's obviously immune to toxic, so it's difficult to wear down naturally. And it's not a sitting duck. It has offensive presence as well, both from the physical and the special side. It gets a decent physical move pool. With, Earthquake and Knockoff, being able to hit mons from that side, like fire types and so on. And yeah, it just has really strong offenses, can put in a lot of work, and obviously has reliable recovery, not only with Leech Seed and Giga Drain, but also Synthesis. So looking forward to having this mon and seeing what I can do with it. There's also options like Roar and Workup, so might see those in play this season. Let's go ahead and see what my second pick was. That was going to be Skarmory. I absolutely love Skarmory in the format. Now I know that this, with Ultra Sun and Moon, there's an influx of new defoggers, and that makes it seem like spike stackers like Skarmory would be less viable, potentially, but I actually don't think so. I think Skarmory is good just as a defensive mon in its own. Having access to Whirlwind, also having Sturdy so that it can be just sort of a last ditch check if your opponent has a really threatening mon and you manage to keep the Skarmory healthy and hazards off the field, then there's a 0% chance that that mon will get a sweep in, because you can always just Whirlwind it out and take any one hit. Unless of course they can set up twice. And so that's Skarmory. Just also really good at the hazard war in general. Can set up hazards, has access to taunt, so slower defoggers won't be able to get a defog off. You'll see later on I draft like a decent spin blocker as well, so there's that option too. And yeah, that's going to be Skarmory. Just a great physical wall and great hazard mon in general. Can also use it offensively, and I'm kind of hoping to do that at least once this season. So moving on, we have Thunderincarnate, and this was the third mon that I really wanted to try, in particular because it has both Prankster and Defiant, and both of these are beautiful abilities, and I really wanted to try out Defiant in particular, because what's great about Defiant is this guy actually has a fairly decent attack stat. I think it's 115 or so on. And so if you switch in on the defog, you get +2 attack, and you can fire off wild charges, superpowers, knockoffs. It has a decent move pool, and I think it also gets access to like Smart Strike as well. I actually ended up making this my Z-mon, meaning that I'll be able to use a Z Crystal with it, and I think that'll really help, because that means I'll be able to use Supersonic Sky Strike out of Fly, potentially, to power through mons that way. And also, Electrium Z, just for a really, really strong electric attack as well. So that's this mon used offensively. Can also be good for just utility, being able to toxic things, priority Tailwinds, as well as priority Thunder Waves. all of that very good as a last-ditch stop to set up sweepers and that sort of thing. So the next two mons kind of go together, actually, and I'll kind of just say them both at once. And that's going to be Latios and Azumarill. The reason that these go together is because my idea in drafting Latios plus Azumarill was Memento into Belly Drum. Now, that was just sort of the synergy that I saw, and I wanted to try to make it happen. And in general, Latios is a mon that just looks beautiful in the format right now, I think. Having access to just so many different options in terms of sets. It can run a choice set, and you can, trick to cripple walls, that sort of thing. You can also just run a all-out attacking set, a more defensive set with Roost, utility set with Defog, that sort of thing. You can also run a setup set, either with Calm Mind or even Dragon Dance. This thing has got a decent physical move pool with Iron Head, Earthquake, Dragon Claws, and Headbutt. And so, it's got options, let's just say. It's got options. And at the end of the day, it can click Memento, and you can bring in Azumarill to clean up whatever is left. And so, yeah, basically Latios Memento into Azumarill. Well, it was a cute little thing I wanted to try. And you might say, okay, well, why are you advertising this now? My main idea here is that hopefully I have enough threats that even if my opponent, knows about every threat that I have, it'll be like impossible to prepare for them all. And there's still new things. There's still obviously things that I'm not going to mention in this video that I'm going to be able to use. Like, I think my draft is capable of more than I'm going to be mentioning here. And so that's a bit of a caveat there. And yeah, that's going to be Azumarill. Moving onwards, we have Diggersby. Yes, so got the double bunny here, double huge power, and honestly, I just really loved Diggersby. It was a tough call between Diggersby and Dugtrio. Dugtrio definitely has its uses, being able to trap, steel types and in general just more annoying mons. But the thing is, it can be teched around kind of, and with Shed Shell and whatnot. And I mean, I want to say it's still very effective in the format. And I think it definitely would have been a viable option. I mean, looking back, I have some regrets not going Dugtrio over Diggersby here. But there are some downsides to it. Obviously, opposing electric types are going to run Shed Shell, and it's kind of one-dimensional in what it does, that Dugtrio, that is. I mean, this mon is 2 in some sense, in that it's just going to be an all-out attacker. But I mean, it also has spikes, right? It has a couple of different ways it can set up. You can set up with Swords Dance, you can set up with Agility. You can try to set up with both, although probably that's not going to happen. And gets great priority with Quick Attack. Also gets access to Fire Punch to power through steals. I mean, Earthquake does that as well. But I'm talking about grass types as well, like Tangrowth, for example, or Ferrothorn. Those types of mons. Fire Punch can deal with those. And yeah, that's Diggersby. Let's go ahead and move on to the next thing that I drafted, which was Darmanitan. So speaking about Fire Punch, we got a Fire Punching mon right here. And with sheer force, this thing is going to be hitting hard. There's a couple of different ways I can run this. I can run, the standard Choice Band or Choice Scarf sets if I want to, clean late game, or, potentially just try to get some hard hits in versus bulkier teams. A couple of different ways I can try to run that. I could also run Life Orb, make use of the Sheer Force Life Orb combo. There's also Zen mode, which I felt I should just mention because it's kind of hilarious on this thing. It's not at all viable, and I don't know. I want to get it in once. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to manage, but I'm probably going to try. And I'm probably going to lose, but I'm probably going to try. So we'll look forward to that happening. But yeah, in general, this mon just hits really, really hard. Base 140 attack. Access to Rock Slide, access to Earthquake, access to U-Turn, which is great. Diggersby as well, access to U-Turn. So Great there for some momentum, and yeah, I mean, something I can see happening, for example, just like an example of synergy here, Thundurus can set up Prankster Sunny Day. Maybe I have a Heat Rock, and then later this mon comes in and Scarf Fire Punch with sheer force just takes out everything. So like that's one example of how the mons can kind of work together on this team, and I can use some of my more support mons to make my powerful mons more scary, even more scary. So that's Darmanitan. Let's see what happens in the 4 picks that I have remaining. First we have Hitmonchan, and like the reason I didn't draft quote unquote a better Hitmon here is mainly just because that's how points work out. The other Hitmons were both 8 points, and I knew what I wanted in the last couple of rounds, so I didn't want to spend 8 points. And that's kind of what it comes to. I still wanted a Hitmon because I think the utility in this mon is definitely worth at least the 5 points I paid for it. Getting access to Foresight plus Rapid Spin is beautiful if my opponent has any kind of hazard stack. Also just, in general, being a decent special wall, being able to tank those special hits and, you know, spread toxics. Also, not being totally passive is a big plus. With Iron Fist and Bulk Up, you can actually hit very hard. You get the elemental punches, of course. You know, you are Hitmonchan after all. And so, hoping this mon could put in some work. It definitely did put in some work last season. I was able to get a couple of setups with it, as well as just a couple of solid games with it, so hopefully I can put in some work again this season. Next up here we have Dusclops. So Dusclops worth 2 points, and this one isn't as bulky as you would guess from its 130 defense and 130 special defense. That's because of the abysmal 40 base HP. I mean, if this thing's HP was, you know, 100 or something, then it would be amazing. I mean, it wouldn't be OU or anything, but it would be incredibly better than it is. We'll put it like that. It's still does what I needed to do on my team, is what I'm hoping for, at least. It's another mon that gets access to Memento, gets access to Haze, gets access to Trick Room, which is a big one. Trick Room plus Memento is actually great. Being able to Trick Room and then remove myself if I want to, say, get a sweep going with Zoomeril, is kind of the main thing that I'm looking at, since that's my main Trick Room sweeper. I could also potentially run Trick Room Diggersby or Trick Room, I don't know. Those two are kind of the only ones, because Darmanitan's pretty fast, unless my opponent has a really speedy team. So mainly that's something here. Also versus opposing Trick Room teams, I can this gives me a bit of a better answer to those kinds of teams, which would otherwise run through me a bit. So that's Dusclops. Just a lot of solid utility, and it has a bunch of cool sets that I'm really looking forward to trying out. For example, like a block set with Spite, and just in general, like Pain Split. A lot of great utility moves. So that's Dusclops. You know, Spin Blocker, as I mentioned earlier. This is a decent Spin Blocker because a lot of Rapid Spinners can't really do that much to this. So that's kind of this mon. And no reliable recovery is why it's as cheap as it is, but I think it can still do some work. And we got Blissey next. So Blissey, I mean, the last two mons, I was still not sure whether I wanted Blissey or Chansey. I kind of knew I wanted one of them. I was still sort of considering, you know, foregoing either, but the reason I wanted Blissey here is Wish support. And that's the biggest thing. Not only Wish support, but Healing Wish. And so I kind of didn't draft this mon as, you know, primarily a special wall. I mean, having a special wall is nice. This thing effectively walls most special attackers. I mean, it's a pink blob, that's what it does. But really the reason I drafted it more was because of a Wish support. Also, of course, its role as a cleric is nice, having access to Aromatherapy or Heal Bell. But Healing Wish. Healing Wish is big for me because if I'm able to, you know, break some holes in his team with Azumarill, let's say, or Diggersby, but it gets really weakened, or even Darmanitan, any of those mons, but they get really weakened, then I can just send this thing out later and Healing Wish them back up. So I get the Healing Wish support, and I also just get a really bulky, solid, specially defensive mon. Now, of course, something that you might notice with this team is that a lot of my mons look like they're passive, but I'm going to argue that they're not actually that passive, because, I mean, yes, this thing is set up fodder in a lot of circumstances, and if my opponent, you know, pulls certain doubles, I might be in a sticky situation, but it does have the tools to avoid being complete setup fodder. You know, it has access to Thunder Wave, Seismic Toss, and you know, it can also set up rocks, which is just another good property of it. And the fact that it can remove itself with Healing Wish, I think is actually really big. That's going to be this mon. And finally, rounding out the squad, for those of you who have been keeping track so far, you'll notice that I only have 1 point left. And how do I invest this single point? Well, I put it into the bug here, Loomis. Yes, it's a Loomis. I actually didn't know that pronunciation until I looked it up beforehand, because I wasn't so sure, but yeah, a Loomis. So what's with the Loomis? The last 2 rounds I was considering Chansey plus Volbeat or Blissey plus Loomis, and I went with this one because, well, it was more because of Blissey over Chansey than it was the 2 bugs. Both bugs are really great supporters, especially for their price. They have access to Tailwind, they have access to Baton Pass, access to, of course, all the status, also Roost. This one gets access to Charm, as well as Aromatherapy and Wish, while the other one gets access to Tail Glow and Trick. So it was a bit of a trade-off which one I wanted. I ended up going for this one, mainly just because it was priced a little bit less and early when Blissey over Chansey. It's kind of all there is to it there. Yeah, I mean, also Tailwind. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but Tailwind is pretty big because Prankster Tailwind and Prankster Defog as well. I could see these mons supporting the team really well. Like, let's say you get off a Prankster Tailwind sort of as a suicide, and then your opponent has to deal with, let's say, 3 full turns of Tailwind Darmanitan, or 3 full turns of Tailwind and max speed Azumarill. And that's really scary to deal with. So that's kind of how I'm hoping this mon will function with the rest of the team. And yeah, that's going to be the draft. A lot of cool strategies. I only mentioned some of them because obviously I don't want to necessarily give away all of my secrets. But yeah, really looking forward to seeing how this team does. It's not as defensively solid as it may seem at first sight. I mean, yes, I do have Skarmory plus Blissey, but almost every draft has an offensive threat which I just cannot switch into. And that's not really the goal of this team. And I'm not trying to draft, you know, stall or something, right? I'm not trying to have a switch into everything. What I'm more trying to do is trying to have a balance of bulk and offense that will be able to pressure the opponent offensively, while also having the necessary bulk to sort of switch around and wear my opponent down in between my offensive threats putting in work. And so that's kind of the deal here. Like, just as an example, a physical fire, I don't switch in well to physical fire type attacks. I mean, you can see the only thing that resists physical fire type attacks are Latios and that's it. Latios and Darmanitan. Neither of which particularly want to take hits because they're more offensive. Azumarill as well, but same story. But anyway, guys, that's going to be the draft. I do have a question of the day for you guys, so if you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a like, do all of that jazz, if you enjoyed, of course. And the question of the day is, which of these mons do you think is going to be the MVP? Either the offensive or the defensive MVP. And you can leave that in the comments below if you would like. Anyways, signing out for now, this has been Non-Zero, aka the coach of the Pittsburgh Celesteelas. In the next couple of days, I'm going to be uploading a couple more videos about this draft, including one on what I think are the most economical picks in the draft, like the best steals, kind of, and also just a more general analysis of everyone else's drafts, with sort of like a power rankings attached. Anyways, look forward to those, and signing out for now. Peace.